Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in. This week, PozzA and I dive into our predictions for the 2024 season. We cover all three classes, just the top riders from all, who we think is going to be sitting in that top spot, who we think is going to be world champion of Moto3, Moto2 and MotoGP. We did not go into Moto3 or Moto2, depending on whether we like it or not is a different story, but the simple fact is I don't know enough about it yet. Last season was my first season trying to watch Moto3, and I didn't end up watching all of it, mainly because I sit there and watch every session of Moto3, Moto2 and MotoGP. I need to sleep and eat and do other things on the weekend, so that is why we didn't dive into Moto3. Before we do get onto that part of the pod, I do just want to share some news. Now, this news is in relation to the tyre pressure rule. So, if you've been following it, if you've not, what's been happening is, for safety reasons, Michelin have put a limit on the tyre pressure, the minimum tyre pressure that teams can run. At the end of last year, it was 1.88 bar. And basically, they had to bring in some rules that this would be, if teams were under this tyre pressure for 50% of the race, then they would get disqualified. At the end of last year, we started to see them getting penalties for this as sort of a way to start getting the teams used to it. Coming into this new season, we're expecting the disqualifications. And given the fact that I believe at least a third of the grid ended up getting penalties last year, that this would have had a massive, massive implication for the championship. So the good news is they are reducing that limit sort of thing from 1.88 to 1.8. So this effectively doubles the working area of the tyre pressures. I'm terrible at explaining this, but it basically opens that window a little bit more for the pressures that the teams can run. So this will hopefully lead to a lot less drivers, pilots, getting penalised for running those tyre pressures. Whether they'll change the penalty system to hopefully be not just straight outright disqualification, I think doing what they did at the end of last year, having the 3-second time penalties, then getting up to 6 seconds, maybe a third offence you could get disqualification from that race. But realistically, I don't think just outright disqualifying someone for tyre pressures is a good idea at all. It would really tarnish the championship. It was bad enough when Brad Binder got track limits in 2 races that knocked him off the podium. Because the reality is, pretty much the majority of people will watch the race and then just switch off. They're literally just there for the entertainment that the race provides. And these after the race penalties and after the race results changes do not help the sport at all, because people will be like, oh, why did this happen? Because Dorna's still pretty confused about how to communicate these sort of things via social media, and there doesn't seem to be one source of truth. So it comes to the diehard fans to have to explain it when people rejoin the chats later on and be like, oh, I thought Brad Binder was on this podium, and then it's like, no, he actually lost that place to so-and-so because of track limits, and then they're like, oh, I didn't know that, and then all the implications of those points differences when it comes down to World Championship standings and things like that. It just makes it far more complicated than it needs to be. So fingers crossed this change from 1.88 to 1.8 bar gives the teams and the riders a lot more of a working window. So fingers crossed, and we can only wait and see. But now onto a much more fun topic, our 2024 predictions. We are going to start with Moto3 and give you our top 3 predictions. So I will start with my three predictions, and I'll give you a little bit of a background as to why I've gone with them. And so the first one in P3, I think, is going to be Ivan Ortola, just because of the season he had last year. I think he's still going to be a really strong contender, but I do think that consistency may hamper him a bit this year. And I do think that in P2, we're going to see Danny Holgado. I was really debating him winning the championship in my predictions, but I just think after we saw him lose so much form towards the end of last year, I think he may suffer the same fate this year. And for P1, I have gone with David Alonso. I just think now he's actually had a full season, I think he's going to come in really, really strong and be better all around. At least I really hope so, because he seems like such a fun character, and I do think he's going to be a MotoGP world champion one day. What do you think?
I very nearly went for the exact same three riders in a slightly different order. But for P3, I put Colin Vire. Um, the height that he has may disadvantage him a little bit, but with that extra season after his rookie season last year, obviously that little bit of extra experience coming into this year. He ended the season pretty well last year, so I think he'll finish in third. Um, I had David Alonso in second, just because again he was a rookie last year. Um, Little bit of extra experience coming into this year as well. Um, Obviously really impressive last year. But I think Danny Holgado, with the extra year of experience on top of them, I think he'll just about edge out in front.
That is quite interesting that you've gone so similar, yet completely different in a way. And I really like that. I'm still going to continue to disagree though, because I just don't trust Holgado enough to keep that form at all. But we will see. So let's move on to Moto 2. Who do you think? Give me your predictions.
In P3, I had Aaron Canet. Um, I mean, obviously, you'll be hoping he gets his first win this year, and realistically, it's probably about time. Um, but yeah, I think he'll probably beat out Dixon just about after Dixon finished up there last year. But in second, I had Fermin Aldeguer. If he can carry that momentum that he had in the last half of last season, uh, get a better start than he did last year going into this year, and just carry that form throughout the year, um, he could be a really big challenger. But I had Tony Arbolino in first, just again more experience, sort of the rest of them, and again if he can maintain form throughout the year and not drop off like he did last year, I think he'll be pretty comfortably up there for most of the year.
I've gone for the exact same. I'm not even kidding. I have gone P3, Aaron Canet. I obviously definitely do want him to get his maiden win this year. That's just a no-brainer. And I totally agree, it's about time. I do think if he does get that maiden win early in the season, we could actually see him, running away with a few races once he gets past that mental block. And if that does happen, I do think that he's more likely to be further up on the list. But P2, I have also gone Ferdinand Aldeguer, but with Tony Arbolino beating him, because like you said, it would just be coming down to Tony's experience and providing he doesn't lose his form towards the end of the season, which he has been definitely known to do in previous seasons. Like last season wasn't the only time it's happened to Tony. So I'm really hoping he holds that off because I do think if he doesn't win a world championship this year, or if he's not even battling at the front in a few races, I think his chance to move to MotoGP will sort of be lost. So I really hope that doesn't happen. So, after we got the exact same for Moto2, if we look at MotoGP, now in P3, I've put my boy Marc Marquez. As much as I'd love for him to come in first season on a Ducati and run away with the World Championship, I don't think it's going to happen, especially now that we have actually seen the test and that significant step forward in the engine braking and the fairing effect on the new Ducatis. I don't think we're going to see a year-old satellite bike take that championship spot. So that's why I put Mark in P3. He's starting to look comfortable on that bike, so I do think he'll get a few wins and things. I think he's going to be beaten by factory KTM rider Brad Binder in P2. Fingers crossed, purely just because I want to see Brad up there getting his elbows out and fighting for wins and hopefully getting a main GP win this year after he was denied it last year and hopefully not getting booted off the podium. But in P1, I think it's going to be 3 in a row for Pecco Bagnaia. Like I said, those Ducatis looked really strong at the test. He's got a lot more form, and provided he doesn't yeet himself off out of the lead multiple times this season, I think it'll be quite easily and comfortably his.
I didn't even realize this, but my top three was literally just the top three in the test in a slightly different order. But in third, I had Bastianini, given he can stay injury free this year. Um, I hope he's up there contending for a few more race wins. Um, yeah, not much else really. In second, this is just purely because I'd like to see a different champion. I had Bagnaia. Um, and yeah, in first, Jorge Martin. If he can, again, something throughout all three classes, just a bit more consistency throughout the year, and um, staying mistake free as much as you can. Um, I feel like Martin can do it with another year of experience, um, and especially a year of experience being in the title fight.
That's quite funny because I did strongly debate putting Martin up there, and I think it's really interesting you've gone for a Ducati clean sweep again, which, yeah, given how really impressive they are looking, it's not a bad shout at all, actually, which is kind of scary, but it is what it is. So, as we cannot do our prediction for who is the best rookie of the year, because we know that is going to go, well, at least in the GP class, we know it's going to go to Pedro Acosta. Instead, for predictions, I'd like to know what race you think he's going to be best at, what you think his best result is, and where do you think he's going to place in the World Championship?
In terms of where he's going to place, I'm thinking somewhere in obviously the top 20 he'd want. But somewhere in the 10th to 15th sort of range. Um, exact number I had 13th in the standings. Just looking at Augusto's year last year, I feel like he was in and around the top 10 for most of the year, and he ended up 17th in the standings. Um, but really, just a couple of points finishes, a couple of top 10s. Is all Acosta really needs out of his rookie year, I'd say. Um, just historically, I feel like his best tracks in Moto2 mainly have been Le Mans and Mugello. So I feel like he'll probably do pretty decent at those tracks as well. Um, yeah, not much else apart from that, really.
See, I've also gone with Le Mans as one of his best races. I think he'll be slightly better at Sachsenring, but I do think the fact that so many other people are quite confident in Germany that he'll struggle to place really well there. But at Le Mans, I actually see him getting a podium, which I think would be really good. I do want to see him get a win. I don't know which race it'd be, but I am sort of expecting Pedro to win a race in his rookie year, and I do think I'll be quite disappointed if he doesn't. At the very least, I expect a couple of podiums, just from how quickly he looks to have picked up riding a MotoGP bike. I've watched interviews with the riders, and they're all saying that he does not look at all like a rookie. So I guess that has me a little bit more expectant. As for championship standings, I have been a lot more generous than you, and I have put him in P8 in the standings. I did actually also go and look at Augusto Fernandez's standings and how all that went. But I think, just given the fact I expect him to get a couple of podiums, I think he's going to do pretty well and be a lot higher. I do think he'll actually be the second highest KTM in the standings. So, sorry Brad Binder and Augusto, not Brad Binder, sorry Augusto Fernandez and Jack Miller. I think, yeah, that's going to be, it's going to be a Pedro and Brad show at KTM, at least I think. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
So that is it. Those are our predictions. We will definitely do a short section of a podcast later down the track after this season is finished to see who was closest. Given the fact we had both said the exact same things for Moto2, no one can win that. But I'm pretty sure, well, at least I hope I'm going to have PozzA beat for Moto3 and MotoGP. We are also going to be doing a livery rating podcast coming soon. We're waiting for all of the liveries to drop, basically. So far, they've all dropped except Prima, Pramac, and given the fact they did do quite a radical change up last year, and Martin's out there testing in black leathers, which I think look absolutely incredible. He'll still be in those leathers for the Qatar test, which is about to happen, but after all of them have dropped, we will be able to go through and compare them all. We'll have lots of pretty pictures up on screen as always. Coming into this season, I am going to start using clips that have been shared on Dorna social media itself. We'll see how far we get before we get some copyright takedown requests, but I will fight them all every single time. So keep in touch for those interesting developments. What did you think of our ratings? Drop your ratings in the comments below if you feel like it, because I'm so curious. We're also thinking of starting our own fantasy league, but we're not entirely sure whether we'll do that or if we'll just piggyback off the Discord server one, which is much more likely. But I will drop the link when we have that. I'll be here next week, rambling away on a Monday about MotoGP, digesting the Qatar test. Have a great week.